Hello YouTube and welcome to another Cisco tutorial. So in this video I'm going to show you how actually to protect your Cisco devices from network attack called Vlan Hopping. So are you ready? Let's get started. So first of all, what is Vlan Hopping? So as I told you, VLAN hopping is actually a method for attacking a network, okay? And the main goal for this method is to gain access to other VLANs on the same network, okay? So for example, here I have simple topology. So here on my main topology I have Cisco switch, okay? And I have here an attacker, and the other side I have actually the DHCP client, which is a Linux box, okay? So as you can see, the Linux box and our router here at the bottom are both on VLAN 10, and the attacker is by default the native VLAN on the switch, which is VLAN 1, okay? So this attack, VLAN hopping, will allow this attacker actually to gain access to this other VLAN. So in this topology here, by default attacker cannot reach the VLAN 10, but when we will be performing this attack, the attacker will be actually able to gain access to the VLAN 10, okay? And actually it performs this attack by sending DTP packets to the switch, okay? So what is DTP? So DTP is a proprietary Cisco protocol, okay, used for negotiating a trunk link between two switches, okay? So by default it is enabled on the Cisco switches, okay? So for example, let's go to the switch and see its configuration. So let's go to the switch here we go. So as you can see here on this interface here, giga 0/0, if I perform the command show interface giga 0/0 switch port, you can see different options here. So switch port is enabled, which is normal, and here the most important thing, the administrative mode is dynamic auto. So by default on Cisco switches, actually DTP is enabled. So actually DTP stands for dynamic trunking protocol. So this dynamic trunking protocol is enabled by default, and interfaces will be, as you can see here, in the administrative mode called dynamic auto. So if you have an older switch, the administrative mode will be actually dynamic desirable, but here we have dynamic auto because it's a new switch, okay? And also we can verify that the DTP is enabled. If you see here, as you can see, negotiation of trunking is on. So if you see negotiation of trunking is on, it means that DTP is enabled by default, okay? So actually DTP will allow, for example, this interface here to negotiate a trunk. So if the attacker sends some DTP packets requesting to be a trunk, so by default the switch will allow that, and this link here will be a trunk, so the attacker actually can access the other VLAN on the network, okay? So let's perform this attack and see actually that live. So once again, disclaimer, do not use that in production environment or for the material that you don't own. So use it for your own lab and for educational purposes, okay? So in order to perform this attack, we'll be using Kali Linux in this client here, okay? So let's go to my Kali Linux. Here we go. So I am on my Kali Linux, and we'll be using the famous tool called Yersinia. So you should execute it, and if you want, in the graphical user interface, Yersinia -G. Here we go. So this is the graphical user interface for Yersinia. So let me just maximize that so you can see it very well. Okay. So before performing the attack, let's go once again to our switch and see actually this interface here in which VLAN it belongs. So I can go to the switch and perform show interface, or actually IP interface brief. Okay, so here you can see the interface giga 0/0 is up. We can also see in which VLAN it belongs. Show VLAN brief. Okay, so by default interface giga 0/0, as you can see here, in the native VLAN called VLAN 1, but the other two interfaces, giga 0/1 and giga/0, are actually on the VLAN 10, which is called manager. So as you can see here on my topology, our client here Linux box is in VLAN 10, and the DHCP server, which is actually a router, is on the VLAN also 10. So actually this Linux box here can ping this DHCP server. So let's verify that. So I'm going to do Linux here client, and let's verify its IP address, ifconfig. Here we go. So indeed it has this IP address, that 1.3, and it can ping this router here. So let's ping it. So they are on the same VLAN, so it can ping each other, which is as you can see here. So as I told you, this interface here giga 0/0 is on VLAN 1. Okay, so let's perform this attack using Kali Linux and see what we get. So let me return back to my Kali Linux. Okay, so this is the interface as you can see here. So there are different actually a protocol that we can launch an attack with. Okay, and here you can see DTP, which actually stands for dynamic trunking protocol. So we'll be using this protocol in order to attack actually our Cisco switch. So let's click on this button here, launch an attack. Here we go. We get another window and we choose DTP, and here you can see description of the attack we can do. So we can actually enable trunking by selecting this radio button here to perform the attack. Okay, so let's launch the attack and see the result. Okay, so now the attack is launched. So actually what will happen here, so before this link was just a normal link, now it will become a trunk link, and this attacker, which is Kali Linux, will be able to access the other VLAN. So first of all, let me go to the switch and see if something has changed. Okay, so I'm here on my switch. So if I do the same command, you can see now that in VLAN 1 giga 0/0 has disappeared, because actually it becomes a trunk port. We can verify that using the command show interface trunk. Here we go. So you can see now that the interface giga 0/0 has become a trunk. Okay, and with encapsulation 802.1q. Okay, so actually it can access the other actually VLANs. Okay, We can also perform the other command, show interface giga 0/0 switch port. So you can see now the operational mode of this interface is trunk. So remember, before it was an access port. So if I scroll up, actually you can see that on the previous. So before, as you can see here, the operational mode is static access, but now giga 0/0 has become, as you can see here, has become a trunk port. So actually on Kali Linux we can launch, for example, Wireshark and see the traffic, so he can actually ping the other VLAN 10. So before it cannot ping because they were in different VLAN, but now he can actually see the traffic that happens here in the VLAN 10, and he can actually also ping the other devices. So here, let's for example verify that. So I'm going to this Kali Linux and I will create a VLAN interface on the 10 VLAN and try to ping it from here to here, from the Kali Linux to the Linux box. So let's go to my Kali Linux here. So the attack is still running, and let me just minimize that. Here we go. So I will go here to my interfaces and I will try to create another interface. So I'll click on here on this button here, add new connection, and I will select a VLAN because I want to create a VLAN interface. Here we go, create. And of course the VLAN that we want to access is VLAN 10. We can also use IP address. So for example 192.168.1.4 for example, with default network mask. So you will tell me, how can I know the IP addresses on the other VLAN? So simply, as I told you, you can run Wireshark on this Kali Linux and he will see the packets that are on the other VLAN. Okay. And of course the parent interface, we have to choose the one that we have. Let's save that. So now if I open another terminal here, and if I try to ping this Linux box here, which has an IP address .1.3, let's see if it can ping. So indeed you can see now that this attacker here can actually ping the other box, which is another VLAN, just performing this attack, because actually the attacker here, or the interface here, will become a trunk port, so this Linux box can access the other LAN. So he can also of course ping the router also. Okay, so you can see how easy it is to perform this VLAN hopping attack. So now how can we stop actually this kind of attack? Okay, so first of all, let me stop the attack here on Yersinia. So I will go to actually actions, list attack, and I will stop all the attack here. So only one attack has been performed. So as I told you, how can I actually prevent that VLAN hopping to be actually exploited on my network? So simply we have to go to our switch and configure some actually commands. So actually what we gonna do in our switch in order to prevent from this kind of attack, as I told you, DTP is enabled by default, so we should always disable it. So in order to disable it, you go to this interface, for example here, giga 0/0, and you perform the command in the global config mode. So let me go to this interface here, giga 0/0, and you perform the command switch port no negotiate. So this is the first measure that you must do. Okay, and other command here I cannot do it because here it's trunk port, it's still on the trunk port, but you should always configure it by default here. Okay, and also you should convert this interface here to switch to the access mode. So this is the two commands that you should do. Mode access actually. Okay, here we go. So now you can see this two command has been activated. Okay, so by default any interfaces that are used on your switch, you must configure it as an access interface, and also disable the DTP protocol using this command, switch port no negotiate. So let me go to the privilege exec mode and verify that using the command show interface giga 0/0 switch port to verify that if the TP is still enabled or not. So here we go. You can see now the most important thing here is this line here, negotiation of trunking is off, which means that DTP is disabled. Okay, so always do not enable DTP by default. Okay, and also another measure that you can do is disable any interface that you don't use. So if an attacker come and plug its device to this port, he will see it's disabled by default. So enable only the interfaces that you using. Okay, and also do not enable DTP by default, as I told you. So that was just a brief introduction how to actually enable or disable DTP in your network, and how to prevent your Cisco devices, especially Cisco switches, from the VLAN hopping attack. As always, I hope it has been informative for you, and I want to thank you for viewing. Bye bye.